Okay, I think we'll get started, and we'll kind of come out of the gate. We assume there are a few people who probably showed up over at CDC and are meeting by themselves. Will probably be a little bit late arriving, so but we have a lot on the agenda, so we want to get rolling. And we're going to start with Kevin. Kevin, we really appreciate the use of your facility here. As you said, free parking.
Free parking is a must, right?
Yeah, so.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody. Wanted to just welcome you to OOD. This is our central office. We also have a building, 3 buildings down where we do all of the Social Security claims. So some of you may or may not know. Kind of our 2 main focal points with individuals with disabilities is we like to talk about a continuum of services. And so at age 14, by federal law, vocational rehabilitation can begin, although pre-ETS, we'll be talking about, allows us to do a little bit before that, to talk about employment for individuals with disabilities. And so that's where you hear vocational rehabilitation and our services for the visually impaired. And that lasts as long as anybody would like to have services with us and who are eligible for that. Once an individual has stabilized employment, though, we do have to close the case. So that's usually where, especially if it's an individual with DD, then that's where we have handoffs, and that's usually where we work with our partners intently to do that. If they're unable to work, that's where Social Security comes in. So a lot of people don't realize, they think probably it's our good friend Cynthia Dungy who oversees that, but it's actually OOD. So down the block at 565 adjudicators who adjudicate every claim that someone in Ohio files with the federal office. In my 8 years here, we've had a high when the economy's down. This is usually what happens. We have 206,000 initial claims filed. Last year, when the economy was much better, we were about 170,000 claims. For those of you who want to know, just for numbers purposes, $9 billion with a B, $9 billion is issued in Social Security to Ohioans anymore. So
that's money well spent. I just want to say,
yeah.
I'm 66.
Yeah, exactly. It's also why we talk a lot about how does technology play a part in that. Well, we know, today is one of this month is our Super Bowl for OOD. It's National Disability Employment Awareness Month. We're having a job fair down at Ohio State University where we have over 400 individuals on our caseloads that are in what's called J status, which J stands for job ready. Some of them have been working for years to get to this point. Good morning. And so now it's kind of neat to see our counselors. Their hands are a little sweaty. The consumers' hands are a little sweaty. And we've got over 50 businesses there. Some of them will actually hire on the spot to gain employment. So we're really excited by that. So I apologize. I will be skipping out. I got to go down to that job fair, but I'm hoping I'll be back in time before the end of the day. So I want to turn it back over to Joe to kick things off. But anything you guys need while you're here, please don't hesitate to ask. Susan will be front and center. And a lot of our staff who are here who have really been leaders in our efforts with Technology First are going to have some really interesting presentations for you guys to take a look at. So thanks for being here.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Appreciate you hosting as well as all the good work you guys do that really support folks in our system. So thanks. Just a couple of words of welcome. We have, we'll probably go around and do introductions. We have a few pinch hitters here today as we're kind of working through things. Wanted to make another, maybe why don't we start with that, just do quick introductions around the circle. We have our first presenters over here to the left, and so.
I'm Allison Levy with Hamilton County Developmental Disability Services. I'm a supervisor there and the lead on our remote monitoring initiative.
I'm Lee Brack, Hamilton County DD. I think you all had a presentation for Julia, maybe the last session. I'm currently in SSA and currently serving her.
Steve Ahoff, family outreach Education Coordinator for the Department of PD.
Sean Henry, locality, the executive director there.
Kyle Ford with the ADD on the Ohio Technology Project.
Howard Collins, a parent of a, where's the move?
Paula Raffy from the Nice Center.
Steve Oster, the superintendent for the Knox Center Stockton. I'm the less improved Jenny Roscoe.
And I'm Susan Pugh, and I work here at OOD.
Jenny Steele with OBRS in King County, yay, and the chair of APA.
Kathy Phillips with Turning Point and No Limits, Mahoney and Columbian and Trumbull County, and OWA member.
Father Shumay, Hamilton County, advocate.
Kevin.
Okay.
We are represented.
So we're ready to go. So, and just,
We have a few other speakers, maybe.
Oh,
we
that's
could get
right.
these folks to introduce
I'm
themselves.
Adam Shoemaker with THS. We're a remote sports vendor.
I'm Sarah Kelly. I work here at OOD.
Ryan Green, Miami County Superintendent, we've been asked to present.
Jessica Nutt, Assistive Director.
did we catch all the speakers?
I think we did.
Okay. So just the last comment, again, appreciate everybody being here in the work. Some of us spent yesterday talking a lot about budget, new money, issues with staffing. And again, I think one of the things that is a real positive initiative that we need to continue to work on, again, is the use of remote supports. And what we're learning is it's not just about the fact we may be able to get by with less staff. It's about people are increasing their independence, their freedom, and actually sometimes being much more satisfied with their life through the use of the technology. The other comment I wanted to make, again, thanks to everything you all are doing. A few of us had the opportunity to be at the Coleman Institute at their massive tech conference. And Ohio is really the only state that has a process and is thinking about strategically how. And as you know, it appears that we have more people with remote supports than any other state. And so how we are thinking about it and how we're trying to build an infrastructure is very intriguing to a lot of other states, and we've had follow-up contacts since that conference with other states thinking about how they replicate, because what we all learned from employment is if you don't build the support systems, it really doesn't happen. It will not happen naturally. And so what our work here is to look at how do we make sure our system is positioned so that we're moving forward with this to the maximum rate possible while still making sure we're moving forward responsibly and that we're moving forward with the support of the people who receive our services. So that's really our role. We'll start at the end of the meeting today with Joe's leadership to really start working on some of the goals, the benchmarks, and then next month, November, is absolutely critical. So that's when total focus on benchmarks pretty much, bringing the project to the close so that at the December meeting, we can hopefully bless a draft report that will go to the governor and the next administration to continue to carry out the good work that's going on. So those, Joe, are my introductory comments. Kick it to you to get us rolling.
Wonderful. Good morning, everybody. You should have a packet in front of you. And let me just take 1 minute to just do a quick overview of the agenda so that we can get in gear for the day. And Director Martin, you mentioned, and I think it's really true, that today we're taking a turn into beginning our draft development of our benchmarks. So today, here in a few minutes, we're going to begin with some follow-up from the September meeting. You have a report, a summary of the September meeting in your packet. There were a couple of issues that we wanted to come back with you about in the spirit of follow-up. And one is some additional clarification on billing. You had good questions about that last time. So we have some additional clarification on that. And then you might remember that at last session, Jenny Rosecott Miller offered to do a survey of county boards to find out why people weren't using remote supports, and Steve has a report on that, and you have an Excel report in your packet on that as well. At that point then, later this morning, we'll take a turn to hear from our guest presenters. You heard them introduce themselves to you earlier. And these presentations are tailored specifically to address some of the strategic issues that you identified last time. So these are a little bit different kinds of presentations than we've had before. So as we introduce these speakers one at a time, we'll kind of remind you of the strategic issue that they're going to be spending a bit of time talking with us about this morning. We'll have lunch as usual, and then as the director mentioned, we'll devote our afternoon time to looking at an update on the deliverables and beginning to wrap our arms around the work of benchmark development. As usual, it's a really tight agenda, so if you will allow me, as usual, especially presenters, I'll be a little bossy about the time, and so that we can stay within our constraints and get everything in that we want to do today. We're good to go, Kathy? I saw you pass around the sign-in sheet. That's good. When it makes its way back over here, Steve, if you could kick it around the rest of the room, that would be good. And since we are in new space, folks, restrooms, you did say this, didn't you?
Restrooms are just down the hallway here to the left, and they'll be on your right-hand side.
Terrific. All right, shall we dive in? First item on our agenda is remote support billing update. And Lori, we have you on for that. And I will say that you have an item in your packet related to that. It should be the second item. It says billing for remote support at the top.
I won't read this to you, but I just wondered if you guys have questions, if anything about this is not clear, please get back with me and we'll be glad to make any adjustments as needed. A point of clarification, again, you can have a paid backup provider or unpaid, and how the payment authorization works or the claims are submitted is different based on the type of remote support. When we use the term remote support vendor, we mean all those folks that we talked to last week. So all the guys who are actually doing the monitoring from a distance in their, quote, man cave, as they sometimes refer to it. So you have the homemaker personal care agency or the remote support vendor. With paid backup, the homemaker personal care agency is the provider of record who submits the claims through the billing system and pays the vendor through a contract. With unpaid support, the vendor is actually on the pause, submits the claim through the billing system directly. So an overview of how that works is in this little document, this little one-pager. So if you have questions or if things on the one-pager are not clear, you need additional information, let us know and we can amend the document. Is there anything else?
Joe, any comments or questions for Lori? And so this item is like many on our agenda today. We're trying to make sure that we have information and understanding so that next session, particularly if there's a benchmark around billing, we will have a shared understanding about what the current status is. So thank you, Lori.
This is a reflection of how it's done today. It doesn't mean that's how it always has to be. So if you're thinking there's a less cumbersome way of routing the claims or having the vendor always as the payer of record and having a contract with an HPC agency, having the two services separate on the payment authorization, think about another way that if you think this might be cumbersome or confusing, if there's another way that you think we should be thinking about it, let us know, and that's something we can amend in the rule.
Can I clarify? I think from my talks with vendors, they would like that.
Yeah, some of the challenges I think that we face is kind of matching up, when we're providing services and when they think we're providing services. And there are times where we may be asked to provide services outside of the normal schedule. So, we work with a couple larger providers, and it's hard to kind of figure out, I can send you what I think I have, and you can send me kind of what you think you have, and we try to match it up. Of course, staff might show up a little bit late, so you may have these situations where, you know, on their end, staff clocked out at 6:30 in the morning, but we ended at 7, you know, so there's a lot of variation. So we've kind of, in working with other providers, I kind of go off their stuff. Like, I want them to track what they want to bill, and then we can discuss it maybe every month to make sure everything matches up correctly. So it is a challenge because a lot of providers don't really know how to track this on their end. And so I try to tell them, like, you know, what we do is we schedule it just like we schedule anything else. So, you know, it's just like having staff out there. You're going to need to track this. So when HPC leaves at 11 and a vendor takes over at 11, you want to have that in your system because you want to be able to bill that accordingly. But I think that's a big learning curve for providers to figure out. And even some of these billing softwares, they don't know how to bill it. Like, you know, how do you upload it with no employee? There's no employee, you know. So I get a lot of that stuff. Just, you know, is it a fake employee? You know, so and there's ways around it. But
Are you talking remote support or EVV?
Jamie, that's not on the agenda.
Sure sounds like the same crap.
right.
Well, as soon as Lori mentioned, think about this, and it's grist for the mill for the November session, and I could see wheels turning. Kathy, you were already starting to think about things, and Jamie, thank you for asking that question as well. So again, we're not going to dive into this deeply today, but we've got information that you can use next session if you choose. Let's turn then to Steve. You have brought us the results of your county board survey. I would just point out in your packets, you have 2 items related to that. One says county question answers. The other says survey to county boards at the top. So 2 items in your packet, and Steve is distributing a 3rd, hot off the press.
So what you have in front of you, what I just sent you, is kind of the most updated from what was sent in the packet. So Jenny sent out an email to the 24 counties who are using remote technology. 14 of those responded, and I listed all of those in the top half. The ones we did not hear from, we're not calling them out, but I want you to see the counties so you kind of understand the smaller rural counties, most of them, not all, but they're probably going to be the same situations as the ones that responded, is my best guess. Barrier 6 counties have no internet service or spotty service. I can say after Stockton, we've had 2 vendors try to get remote monitoring working, but we have no success. There's no way to get service to people. They just sent home with nothing. Even the TV comes in now, so it's really pretty bad in some of the counties. 2 counties, there's a cost of internet service. Who's going to pay for that? This county board going to be liable for paying the monthly bills on internet service for families who can't afford it. 3 counties cannot find a backup provider, paid or unpaid, due to the DSP shortage. So just the backup is concerning families. 2 counties provide a pushback. They see it's less money for providers, so they're calling families and getting families talked out of doing remote technology when they were talked into it to begin with. And that's rare. 8 counties getting buy-in from families is very hard. They don't think it provides the same level of care. They don't believe they're going to get the same kind of services. So just that fear of the unknown of what's going to happen next. Are the SSA knowledgeable? 10 counties SSAs all know about remote monitoring. Most counties have had 1 or 2 vendors in at least to talk about remote monitoring, as well as conferences. Some counties have brand new SSAs, so they feel like their staff are half and half. The new ones aren't up to speed yet, so they need some training to help new people get up to speed. And 7 counties have had the presentations for vendors already. Suggestions to increase knowledge, seeing is believing, so some stories, some more examples to help families see how it works. When I made some calls, it really was the more complex individuals, like how does that really work if there's a fire? People just aren't trusting it, so I think just outside of the high functioning individuals that people keep seeing, really some of the stories about the people in the middle of the pack, how that would work. Is there a place to go to see all the remote technology? So Kai Hogan did a presentation, they have like 1 million things of technology, but is there a place to go that family can just kind of review and see what's out there easily? Just real life cases of families again. Provide training to county boards and providers, so the counties who aren't buying in, have them in the same room to have a discussion so everybody's on the same page. And more discussion about the DSP shortage with families as a viable alternative. Was there any surprises in any of that talking to counties, is this figuring out how to make it work in counties where there's no,
Right.
the internet?
I guess I thought, Director, I had heard you say that people swear that, that some kind of way they will find the internet coverage, that is not gonna be an issue, but that ain't true, huh? Apparently.
Little what I say is true. But no, I mean, we have heard some of the vendors have said, we
Yeah.
can get, and I don't know if that's correct or not, but we have had some of the vendors say, we can get services anywhere.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
again, that's all I'm quoting, or that's what I've heard.
Okay, well,
Well, I've been around to a lot of different counties, and so far, I've only had one instance where they've said, we tried it and it didn't work. Now, I'm sure there's more than that, but so far, I've only heard one specific instance where that's been the case.
okay.
Steve, have you heard from, I mean, I'm finding the issue is the congregate settings.
So there was a couple conversations about the congregate settings, how to make it work, but one is 24-hour overnight, and restaurants that call or mix
Right.
people. So people are trying to figure out how to make that work and be affordable for everybody else and not costing more. That is an issue too.
So they just won't, if one person wants it and they're just saying, no, it's just too complicated.
Well, it's hard to provide if one can't get it for health and safety reasons and one can. So if people are choosing to live together and different needs, I think that's a lot of the barriers for providers, is that people living together, placement and where people would fit, and where the best funding ranges were, and I mean, being honest, that's how people ended up living together. Now we're trying to think of things differently, and we don't have the most optimal people living together that have the same needs, because sometimes people were placed in where the best funding situations were going to be to provide the services. So now we're up against that barrier, and I think that's a huge barrier of how and why remote monitoring doesn't grow like it should from our past way of handling things.
And in cases of cameras, for example, you gotta get permission from the
Right,
roommate. If
right.
they will
yeah.
do it, if the family don't do it, it just causes another barrier.
You might remember, folks, that we had a brief conversation about this at last council meeting. Jamie, you would remember, you weren't here, but, so that is one of the issues that we asked Total Home Care Solutions, THS, and Adam to address in their presentation this morning. So, I think it does bear further discussion, and I'm sure Adam's perspective will offer some insight in that, and I think we have flagged it as something worthy of our serious consideration. I wanted to go back to the is there internet coverage or not across Ohio? That feels to me like another important issue to have clarification on, particularly next session as we start to think about, or even later this afternoon, as we start to think about benchmarks. Kyle, could we ask you to investigate that in whatever fashion you have at your disposal? You had this anecdotal evidence of one instance so far, but I think it might serve us well to ask you to just do whatever you can do to get us many different perspectives or responses to that.
Can I just ask one more question? I heard that there were some cases where the end using cellular.
Yeah, you can sell it as long as they
So
get.
if there wasn't a broadband.
Yeah, cellular or internet is acceptable, so yeah, maybe if you can't get internet here, you can't get cellular. They have so this is what the vendors have told me, they have technology that'll jump the signal up to use off of a tower in some way, shape, or form that makes it acceptable. And you might be able to explain that a little better than me, but I'm not the one out there hooking the stuff up. Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, I mean, we actually prefer cellular because the dependability of it. Either we'll do, if there's broadband available, we might do that and then have a cellular backup. But in a lot of cases, we'll just go ahead and put in, cameras are what cause the issue. It's a lot of data, but you don't need a very strong signal to stream decent quality video. So And I've never, you know, we work in some rural counties, and I haven't had an issue with cellular or getting, you know, broadband, so, I haven't experienced that yet, but yeah, cellular is definitely a great option. And you can choose from 3 different, you know, of the vendors, and kind of see what signal strength is best, you know, so you can go out there and they can map it out for you, and, you know, should I go with Sprint, should I go with Verizon, T-Mobile, so on and so forth.
I said another thing to that, like in Stockton County, Verizon's the only mobile service you can get, because if you have AT&T, you get no service, no emails, or nothing. So
Okay.
I had staff that don't even have cell phones at home, like they don't work ever at their houses, so they don't get a TV spotty. So I was curious for you to come to Stockton with someone to look at those rural areas
Yeah.
where truly there isn't anything that's good.
Right, okay.
I think we can do 1 or 2 of those successfully. You can
Yeah.
fix all the counties.
Yeah, I think so.
And I just want to clarify, I think I said Andy McMahon, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm not sure, to speak to Steve's, one of the barriers identified in the survey about cost, I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware that in the modified service effective in January, that is one thing that we have submitted to CMS, is to get internet service covered in the cost of remote support equipment.
And you had in your packet at last session a copy of that revision with that clarification there. So January 1st, that should no longer be an issue. Steve, thank you for that report, and thank Jenny and folks for putting that together. Really helpful to have as many different perspectives on these issues as possible, and that really offers us some more insight. So we are taking a turn now in our agenda to hear from 4 different parties. And as we said earlier, each has been invited to share a unique perspective with our council. And first up is Hamilton County DD Services. Allison Leedy and Lee Brack are with us. And the question you had for them was essentially, how have you been able to do what you've done, right? How have you managed to capture as many remote users? Capture's the wrong verb, isn't it? How have you managed to make progress with so many remote users in such a short period of time? So, thank you, Allison. I'm not going to take up any more.
Some of you will
time.
remember our heat map that had Hamilton County had the kind of the highest penetration of remote monitoring of any county in the state. So you guys have been doing some good work down there, so thanks.
Thank you.
Remind us how many, Allison.
Well, we're currently at 58 using remote supports. We started in January with 14. So bear with me. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather today, and but I'm excited to be here, and thanks for having me. So I just wanted to start with talking a little bit about where we started. Our 2018 strategic plan goals were to decrease on-site on-call by 20%. So we tapped into that goal and wanted to look at how we could decrease our on-site on-call usage by increasing our remote support use. And we really looked at wanting to target a specific population to start. So the folks that were on-site on-call, we had 606 people using on-site on-call as of January 1. And so we felt like we needed to target it even further. So we looked at our single live-alone settings to start. We really worked to develop a plan. I'll show you our timeline in a second, but we worked to develop a plan over the first 6 months and really also started by building relationships with our vendors. We reached out to all the vendors. THS and Rest Assured really responded, and we have been working really closely with them over the last 6 months to educate ourselves, learn the service, and go from there. This is just an overview of our timelines. What we did when we started, I put together a small group of 3 people, myself, another supervisor, and one of our team leads, and was really strategic about who we kind of put in place. One of the young ladies that works with me is very rule-based, another is very data-driven, so I really tried to put people in place that would we would work well together and kind of each have our own strengths. And we laid out this timeline of what we wanted to accomplish. So I think that's really important, is to start with a plan, essentially. One of the things, we had 14 people when we started using the service, and we had 14 different ways of authorizing the service. We really didn't, because there were so few people using it, we didn't have a real clear, consistent process or procedure. And so that's where we started, was to educate ourselves really, because even on our small group, we interpreted the rule a little bit different. And so we met with our vendors, and met with different provider agencies and really educated ourselves, and then put together a new process and procedures so that we could train on that. Part of that was we developed a new remote monitoring worksheet. We have a funding team, and so our SSAs do worksheets for our funding group. So we developed a specific remote monitoring worksheet and a page 2 to that, which becomes an addendum to our assessment and then becomes part of our My Plan, which had the protocols, and down here, you can't really see it very well, but are all of the consents that are required in rule, because we had found that we weren't keeping track of those very well. So this is our way of doing that. And then it needs to be signed off on by everybody, so you know that the vendor, the provider, the SSA, and the family are all meeting to talk about it and sign off on it. So we all work together. One of the most important things I think that we did in the beginning was to hold focus groups with our SSAs. We did 3 focus groups, one of SSAs who were currently using remote supports, 2 with SSAs who had a high number of on-site on-call on their caseload but had never used remote supports. The purpose of that really was to determine what the barriers were, to identify some success stories, and then to allow our SSAs to have a voice and be part of the solution. And we really thought that that would be important for their buy-in as well. We developed a questionnaire, like a short questionnaire assessment with 6 questions, so that going into the focus groups, they had a specific individual in mind. So those questionnaires that they filled out were specific to the individuals that they were coming to talk about. So it got their minds thinking before they came in, and we pre-filled them out ahead of time for them. We also had providers on there, so we were able to track how many providers had so many people on-site on-call. I don't know if I'm explaining that well enough, but and then the outcomes of that, we were able to take the barriers that the SSAs came up with. We've put together a frequently asked questions guide. We worked with our vendors to answer a lot of the questions that had come up throughout those meetings. And then through this, we also realized that some of the biggest barriers were our providers, our SSAs, and our families and guardians, and so how to address that moving forward. And then again, just like I said, our SSAs, providers, and families and guardians, and so we put together kind of a specific trainings for each of those groups. So following the focus groups, we conducted provider information sessions. All of this was kind of happening at the same time. We were educating providers, families, and SSAs simultaneously, but the provider information sessions, how we chose the providers initially, we wanted to be very targeted in how we did this. So we did not have large general provider information sessions. We had one-on-one information sessions with specific provider agencies. So we took our top 10 agencies who had the highest number of on-site on-call, and we invited them in for hour-long sessions. We invited our vendors to come. So Rest Assured and THS were both at the table at the same time, along with our small work group, and then those provider agencies. During those meetings, we showed them example cost analysis. We did pull up the heat maps, which I'll show you. So the one on your left is of our whole entire county. We were able to break it down by each provider agency. Each number represents a specific individual, and we gave those providers a sheet of paper with those individuals' names associated with the numbers. And then we were able to break it down even further and say, okay, in this 3-mile radius, you have 4 people. Here, go back to the cost analysis, shows that with 4 people, you're removing 4 on-site on-call. Could you add a backup person that would maybe eliminate one of the perceived barriers that's out there? We talked with them about becoming certified if they weren't already. We educated them on the service. Each provider agency that came in was a little bit different because Some of them understood the service, some didn't, and so each session was kind of tailored to what their specific needs were. As a follow-up from that, those provider agencies then each came back in for a day. They gave us a list after our meetings. It happened kind of organically. Adam was there. It was really interesting. In the first session, the provider was like, well, we agree with those 7. We don't agree with these 3, but here's 7 more, that we think might be ideal. And so we decided from there to then invite in the provider agencies for a day and ask the SSAs to come in. And we did half-hour sessions with the provider, the SSA, and the vendors. And we problem solved for specific individuals. So that way, when they went out to meet with the teams and families, everyone else was on the same page. And we'd already kind of proactively problem solved some of the barriers that we knew would exist for that specific individual. So we tried to get creative in our solutions. At the same time we were doing the provider meetings, we did SFA trainings. We did these with our small teams. So we have 11 teams of SSAs. Each have 10 to 11. Some have 12 SSAs on them. We thought it would be more effective to do small group trainings rather than a large training with our whole staff. So we started by going to those meetings and just training on our new process, on the service in general, how to authorize it, things like that. We also let people know that they might be invited to some of these provider meetings and things of that nature. We also did do an all-staff meeting, but this was more of a celebration than it was a training. We brought in a panel of folks who were using the service, and going back to the focus groups, we identified through the focus groups we were really strategic about who we brought into that all-staff. We identified SSAs who could articulate the service well, that we knew all of our other SSAs would respect. And then we wanted to bring in kind of a wide variety of users, so to speak. So people, to show that it wasn't a one-size-fits-all service. So we had, a set of roommates who were in, who I think would be considered ideal candidates. We had someone with limited verbal skills and some physical challenges. And then we also had a young lady who was a part of our multi-system team who had had previous criminal involvement. So just showing that this service could be used for not just one type of individual. And it was really a celebration of their personal account and their story. And so the whole teams were there, and it was really quite fantastic. We also have created videos. We are continuing to create videos, but we are putting together a video library, and we use those videos at the all staff as well as a celebration. We have really, specifically with the remote supports grant, have started to collaborate with our neighboring counties. And so we're developing kind of a regional partnership with Warren, Claremont, and Butler County. My small team has gone out to Claremont so far, and we've trained, and we have scheduled with Butler County, just helping them to develop a plan too. And we are working on developing a smart home right now. We've got a building, and that will be something that will be shared regionally. We also plan to do lunch and learn sessions as a region in the smart home. So that's been exciting as well. And then lastly, we have put together kind of a toolbox, so to speak. We have an internet site that is where we are able to house our frequently asked questions guide, our video library. It has links to all the vendors' websites and all of our additional forms and procedures all in one spot. Any questions? It's kind of fast.
Well, it's so much process. I mean, I salute you, but oh my gosh.
It's been a lot of work.
I mean, it wouldn't be that much in Coshocton, but oh my gosh.
Well, we're changing a culture,
Yeah.
so it's gonna take time.
I can appreciate that, but I salute you. Oh.
I think when we really looked at this in the beginning, I think there are several different ways you can approach it, and I think, I didn't think that because exactly the culture shift. I didn't think just an overall general training
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
be effective or work.
Yeah.
And what's nice now is that, you know, the first 6 months was quite honestly a ton of work. But could have been another full-time job.
Yeah.
But I think what's been nice now is, and Lee can speak to this, one of our SSAs, you know, when they go through the process with that one individual, then they're now educated on the service. They're familiar with it. They've seen some success. And so then now when someone else on their caseload comes up and it's something that would be considered and they'd be an ideal candidate, they already know and understand. So it's kind of this snowball effect now. Now all these provider agencies that have been invited in, now they all are familiar and aware, and so they're bringing people to us now. But I think we really, in Hamilton County, like the spirit of collaboration is kind of what we were excited about.
Known for that.
So I think, and Adam with THS can probably speak to this. It was at her first hard. We had 2 vendors come in, and it was THS and Rest Assured, and I said, I want you guys to sit at the table together. And they were like, what? And you know, like I have my business over here to run, and I have my business, and I said, like, no, that's not how we're gonna do things down here. So we're gonna work together, and my point was, we need to grow this service as a community, and if this service grows in our community, then your business will grow, and your business will grow. And you have strengths, and you have strengths. And how can we work together to do that? And that's been, I think, pretty effective. Agree?
No, yeah, I mean, Allie forced us to go to lunch, forced us to talk for hours on end, and for, you know, but it's great, it is good, and we got a lot we could share and learn from each other. And so, yeah, it's tough to get to that point, but she was right, she's right on the money. I mean, it's been a good working relationship, and, you know, hopefully it continues, and we all get along very well, and there's a lot of technology that we can share and learn from each other. But that's a tough thing to get past. I mean, we're all competitive. We all want to be the best, and we all want to be the first to introduce this new technology or that. So it was forced upon us, but it was great, you know. And it's the only way to do it. I mean, you need options, and so yeah, she did a great job. And there's a lot of work, and no other county. I haven't seen any other county put this much effort into it, but I think it's what it needs to get this thing rolling. And then once you get 1 or 2 on it, like she said, it just kind of snowballs. Now there's a lot of calls from SSAs. Could be small. Let's start small. Let's talk about an hour here. Let's talk, but it's a lot of interest now, which is great.
So what do you think the potential is? So
In Hamilton?
yeah, just if you, as you look at whoever you want, as you look at Hamilton County, you see where you're at right now.
Our goal's 100 by June of 2019.
And
Where are you now?
Is it
Right under 60.
Right at
60. But if you think about our timeline, the first quarter of 2018
Yeah.
was really planning.
Absolutely.
And so we've really, in essence, only been.
Yeah, so it's really moving faster and faster and faster.
Yeah. And I think as SSAs are educated and starting to use
Yeah.
it, now they understand the benefits and they're seeing the benefits.
Yeah.
The other thing with the collaboration, it's really been also the partnerships between the vendors and the providers has kind of taken off. And so I think as vendors and providers are working together and SSAs are getting educated, everyone's on the same page, it becomes a much easier conversation with families when everybody else knows what they're talking about and feels confident and comfortable with the service.
Well, it's a
So-
very impressive model.
Thank you.
I might add
Go ahead.
that I think the way Alan approached it was very wise, because getting buy-in in the beginning, that's really the key, I think. Because, when I was approached about Julia, my first thought was, no, I'm not comfortable with this, because I was looking out for her health and safety and the health and safety of the community and so forth. And, people have said that the biggest disability our folks face is a history that follows them around the rest of their lives, So certainly we don't want to do that. We don't want to, just think negatively about something that may have happened 20 years ago. But in any event, when we sat down, I was very hesitant, but after talking to Adam and Allie and a couple of other folks, I basically did a 360 because there were several keys. One, I didn't understand all that the technology can do, And also, the fact of having a safety net. There was the provider had another staff person serving somebody 24/7 nearby, so that was one key. Another key was, I was introduced to the fact that there could be a camera facing the door, so if she would leave or anybody would come in, there'd be an immediate alert, and sensors on stoves, and there's all kinds of technology that I was privy to when we met. So we met for about a half hour, and I walked out of there with a completely different perspective than I had when I came in. And I think families are basically, they're going to touch base with the SSA and say, hey, does this make sense to you? And, you're there to look out for their best interests and so forth. So if the SSA then says, hey, yeah, I think this will work, then you give it a shot. I think another key to it also was the fact that it wasn't like an all or nothing thing. We said, Adam is very good with people, and I said, well, very, very smooth. Yeah. He says, Adam said, well, let's just give it a shot. Let's just try it. If it doesn't work, we'll quit. And that kind of an approach, give it a shot, give it a try for a day or 2 or 3 or a week, and then we just kind of, add it as we went along.
You didn't have to make a commitment, yeah.
Yeah. We're all that way. We don't want to make a commitment.
Yeah.
We want to know that we've got a fail-safe, we've got a way out. And I think that's a real key with families. It's just doing, okay, we're not committing, it's just, let's give it a shot. If it doesn't work, well, go back to the drawing board. And if it does, it's going to be a win for everybody. And just one more thing I wanted to mention was that in Hamilton County, I don't know if this is the norm statewide, but basically some of the agencies are doing somewhat of a subcontracting deal or situation where they kind of subcontract with THS, and then the residential agency is actually benefiting financially, and then THS benefits as well. But then of course the residential agency saves that. I guess if I understand it properly, they're losing money on on-site on-call, right? So they're benefiting there, and they're also benefiting by a little bit of a little financial benefit from using remote monitoring. So anyway, that's just
over here. Would you have, prior to this, I think this is wonderful, by the way, good job. Prior to this, would you have considered yourself knowledgeable about remote support?
Well, I was in the SSA world, 15 years ago. Went over to our intake department for 10 years plus, and then came back. I was knowledgeable about it somewhat historically. I didn't know all the new developments, and I think a lot of people may have been to a training 5 or 6 years ago, and they put a camera in, they have a computer, but there's all kinds of little details that I think people need fresh understanding of what remote monitoring can do.
I think until we had our, just speaking about Julia, who I think a lot of you have met, until we had that small session, very targeted, individualized about Julia, I think you knew about remote supports, but you were like, not for her.
Exactly.
And then we were able to problem solve and talk through some of the concerns and the perceived barriers that were out there, and that's really what I think has helped. And now you understand it more, so you don't have to have a targeted session, because now you had somebody, Friday, that you're introducing to the remote supports.
Right.
So now Lee understands, he's been through this, he's seen success with Julia, and so we don't ever have to have another session with. But I think in the beginning, for any county, it's gonna, to do this, it's a ton of work.
One of the reasons I asked that question was on Steve's survey, of those counties, 10 counties said the SSA staff are knowledgeable.
Yeah, well, it's one thing to be knowledgeable locally.
I know.
Right.
Like Allie said, you can know locally what's going on, but
Yeah.
you need to apply it to the individual you're serving.
Yeah.
And, there may be a technology that's, you don't realize how it could apply, or, so we had the pre-meeting with Allie and THS, and then we met with Julia individually and had a discussion there, and we put it into place, and we met again and, made it permanent, so.
I think too, Hamilton County wasn't on that list, but I think we would have said a year ago we were knowledgeable, because people knew, you know what I mean, people knew, but we had 14 people using it.
So that's interesting that thinking you're knowledgeable could actually be a barrier.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Kind of a-
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
why-
Exactly.
Yeah, that's why we need that training for families, you
Well,
know.
in the model home, if
Yeah.
you could bring the SSAs through the model
Yeah.
home and show
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
We ask them, you know.
So Steve, do you know if other county board superintendents are looking at a similar model that's targeting people that are living alone to start to maybe change the
I know
understanding?
superintendents are looking at single homes or trying to find people that they think really could be without. Sometimes the superintendent's saying to SSAs, why do these homes not have remote monitoring? So I mean, there's other people working out besides SSAs who come protect other times.
Right.
I think we care about knowledge. People know the companies. We've heard from the companies, we've seen the companies, so we know what they can do, but really the knowledge of situations is probably not good.
And I think one of the things that made this work real well is that you involved Julian. Once you decided we were gonna run with this idea, you went to Julian and said, what do you think?
Well, that's a great point, because she was nervous, very nervous at first. And yet, knowing that we're gonna give it a shot, if it doesn't work, you know, we'll move on. And she was comfortable with that, just trying. So that's a great point, Robert.
There's some interest, just when you said, if you get 8 or 9 people that maybe could use remote monitoring and get a company in to work with the SSAs and all those families back to back, it might be worthwhile, because you could have the experts at the table, you could have those families and SSAs kind of actually specific to people that are in your mind. And I think we try to do one at a time, which is really hard to say, come on down to one person, it's not worth your time. But I like the approach of maybe doing several a day.
Is this the worksheet?
I'm sorry?
Is this worksheet that you had up there?
Yep.
Is that something all SSAs go over when they do the planning process with the clients? I mean, how is this used?
It's used when somebody is slated to begin remote monitoring,
Okay.
not necessarily
It's
before.
not like
How do you do it? How do you do it during the, what do you do with the person, the processing, people-centered processing, whatever it is, planning, every year?
So, for the work, are you talking about the worksheet?
Do you have an assessment for remote monitoring?
Yeah, how
So
does that
we
get
have-
integrated into that planning process, so it's talked about?
So, I wanna make sure I'm understanding.
I think it's more than my plan,
Yeah.
right? How's this talked about every year, how's it
Yeah.
reviewed every year?
Yeah, I think it's reviewed at the, well, so far it's been reviewed more often than at the annual my plan, just because we haven't gotten around to the year yet, but, I think we're reviewing it as a part, they're in the outcomes and action steps as far as the remote support stuff. And then also, the second page of that worksheet becomes part of, our assessment, which is part of our My Plan packet. And so that is reviewed every year or as needed, but, it has the protocol and all of the consents on there, that are required and rules. So that's reviewed every year as well, or as needed if there needs to be changes to the protocol.
Do you have any idea of the 58 or
Yeah.
60 that you served? Has it been just transitioning the on-site on-call hours, or is it a mixture of the HPC growth as well?
Mostly on-site on-call so far, but we do have, I don't have the current numbers, but we did have a couple 24/7 HPC convert as well. We also, we started with that target population of the live alone, but we do have several roommate situations now that are.
So how did that go?
It kind of happened through these meetings, kind of organically, but the one that's really interesting is we had the map up in one meeting. It was actually, THS was the HPC provider and the vendor on the site. And so we were in this meeting and one of the supervisors was in there, because we had the supervisor and the SSA talking about these individuals. And it was a roommate situation and both of those folks were ideal candidates. And we're like, wait a minute, there's another house with 2 guys, 1.6 miles away. One of them was like really ideal and one had some physical challenges that it probably didn't make sense. If he had lived by himself, he would not have been a good remote monitoring candidate. But we brought the other SSA in for that home and had lots of conversations, started problem solving, and I'm not sure where it stands right now, but we talked about bringing, having a backup in the area, potentially even an aunt lived down the street. Anyway, long story short, we creatively problem solved that so that all four could then move to remote supports, but we would have a backup person right there in that area. And we had a natural backup and an aunt of another person that lived down the street. So we had kind of a two backup thing going on. And it solved transportation issues because the house that had ideal candidates, they needed transported to work in the morning. And so if you eliminate their on-site on-call staff, we have to figure that out. So that kind of problem solved that. But if we hadn't had these meetings, we would have never even considered this other home. And we, wouldn't have been able to kind of find solutions from it. So.
Your goal is 100 by June.
Mm-hmm.
What is your population then if you were 100%? How many clients out there could you service?
There are thousands and thousands.
Thousands.
It's a big county.
We're big. Do you know?
And then like 8,000.
6,500.
6,500 active and growing another couple thousand.
It's big.
So, have you guys had any discussion about how you're going to look at people who haven't been targeted as their yearly planning process comes up? Just a general discussion during the IP process. Like, is that now part of the IP process? Hey, let's look at technology with an open mind, or have you even crossed that bridge yet?
No, I think that we're constantly crossing that bridge because I think we started with this population, and what we did when we started with targeting this group was really, those are the initial providers that we brought in. It was the initial folks we were talking about with SSAs and the focus groups, but we don't even talk about that population, so to speak, as like our target anymore. I think it's now just kind of global. Everybody's been educated. We have in December, we're bringing in additional provider agencies because they've now come to us. So they might not be our highest on-site on-call, but they've come to us and said, we know other agencies that have come in and talked to you guys. We're interested in doing this now. I think another agency came to Lee and said, I've heard this is happening. I have somebody, and so now they're meeting with THS on Friday. So now it's just kind of this snowball. It's just happening.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What's your long range? I was trying to read what you said.
Well, just the question is, so you start with people, the low-hanging fruit, right? The people that you know will be successful. But with the high-beam technology first, at some point that needs to be a discussion for every single person.
Yep.
And so that's why I was asking, since they're so far ahead of the curve, how have they incorporated that into just their general planning process, that we look at technology as a potential option going forward?
So do you see it every mic plan that that's discussed as an option?
I think so. I don't see it being any different
No, it is not.
I know it's currently not.
Yeah.
But I think in the future, it's just like employment first. I mean, let's look at the options. You can always say, this doesn't work for this person, we'll revisit it again in a year. But I think at least having that conversation going forward in the future is key. I agree, it's not happening now.
Right.
But it'd be wonderful, and that's why I was curious if they were doing it yet, because again, they're so far in front.
I think one of the things that we are doing, I know, and I don't know that all of the supervisors are doing it, but we review every plan right now. And so in reviewing every plan, I'm reviewing every worksheet. And as I'm reviewing each plan, because I'm so in tune with it, and then there are other supervisors as well that I know will come to me and say, hey, can you look at this? This is authorized for, it looks like this reason. Do you think this would be a good candidate? So like we are looking at each individual, even if maybe the SSA isn't, going out to the team, and then we're asking them to go back and revisit it from that angle.
We're also making it paramount to our advocacy. Robert, could you just touch base on that so people know?
We're taking a lot of calls from people that we serve, and we're going out and visiting with them and seeing what it is that they have needs for, and in turn keeping remote supports in the back of our mind. Is this someone who probably could use some additional support? So the whole agency is being involved in that process.
So any requests for help, however general, you never forget remote support when you, when you begin to know.
We're actually, and we're not just waiting for the call. I mean, we're really, Robert has a show, how I see it. The whole point of that show is to let everybody know just on a general basis that technology is a part of all of our lives.
Yeah.
And not only does it help people with developmental disabilities, but it helps the families of people with developmental
Yeah,
disabilities.
if we
So
had a
we're putting
Robert
that
in
out.
every county, life would be infinitely easier. Yeah.
So thanks, Robert.
And I think that's the key. It can't be just hanging out there. It has to be a conversation that we know is going to be held at every meeting, because I think right now that it's still that fear based. I mean, I have several emails from, where we've asked for remote monitoring, and SSAs are like, well, we'll just ask the families if they want to choose a different provider, because they don't want to have that. They want the on-site on-call. So I think there's still that fear base of that responsibility that we have to get through. And I think if we start talking about it more in this avenue, more upfront, more open, then maybe we'll start to squash some of that fear.
Steve, what's your insight, families, as far as, just have the conversation with replacing the on-site on-call, what's the barrier?
So I've always been of the mindset that if there's one party at the table that is hesitant about it from a county board or provider standpoint, the family is going to see that and will then in turn make them uncomfortable with the situation. So this idea of having the county board, the staff, talking with the vendor and the provider and having everybody on the same page, the same knowledge base, the same comfort with the service, the products, and the plan going forward, and then presenting it to the family almost as a unified front, alleviates some of that. If they're coming to an SSA and saying, I've heard about this remote support, can you tell me more about it? And the SSA is unsure about it, or the same way with the provider, that conversation could shut down right then and not move forward for years. And so, my thoughts are the more information, the more comfort level the providers and the SSAs have when they present the option to the families. If we're going to start talking about it in every assessment, in every planning piece, it can't just be something that we just roll past as, oh, do you want technology? No, okay, and then just want to pass it. It has to be something that everybody's comfortable about talking about, and that comes from more education, more of these type of sessions where everybody can get on the same page.
Great advice. Did you have providers resistant, the ones that are working with it?
Other than Ohio Valley.
We haven't met with you guys yet.
Or resistant?
They're not. Honestly, in the beginning, yes. The first meeting we had was with a provider who we actually ended up having a complaint about our session. And however, they're now partnered with a vendor and they're using remote supports, and they've come around. But yeah, we had resistance.
Okay.
So, not from all, but
You
from
think
some.
what Steve said is true? If you got one?
Yep. That's why we went about it the way we did, and I think we learned. I thought that, so we actually created the timeline before we did anything else, and the timeline matched up really well with what came out of the focus groups, but we did the focus groups just to confirm that what our thoughts were accurate amongst our SSAs and what the barriers or perceived barriers were. And so out of the focus groups, we really did kind of confirm that yes, like those key people, the providers, the families, the SSAs, everybody needs to be. And I don't think once we have everyone on the same page when it's presented to an individual or family, I don't think we've had much pushback. You think?
Well, especially if it's let's try this out.
Yeah.
There's less to push back against, isn't there?
You don't have to make a commitment.
Yeah.
Because we did have some folks at first, like internally, a couple of our supervisors were really pushing the, we're technology first, we're going to just kind of like do this. And I was like, hold up, if you don't have the buy-in from everybody, and if everybody doesn't understand it, then it's not truly going to be effective. So we had to scale that back a bit.
So what I'm still hearing is the same concern like with every initiative that we have, and that is we have 88 ways of doing it. real good, but other counties not taking the lead. Question to you, and I'm not trying to help. You invited me.
And that was one of many mistakes.
It's only one salty one of us allowed.
Lately, the director has floated the elimination of on-site on-call and replacing with HPC and remote monitoring. Theoretically, that would put pressure on county boards. They would not be able to afford all that HPC. It would put pressure on providers to accept remote monitoring and, in turn, maybe have a unified front for families so they feel more comfortable in individuals. What's your thoughts on
You'll never get invited.
Yeah, right.
Hey, Brack, what's your thoughts on that? I've known you for years. You got thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, I would say you may, a softer approach up front might be a little better. Give it a little while to try to get the buy-in, and then, of course, maybe with the caveat that we're going to move toward this, as opposed to saying July 1st, 2019, there will be no more on-site on-call.
But it still should be assessment driven and need driven.
Right, because I do think
So
that
that's the problem.
Right. Yeah.
on-site on-call serves a need and a purpose for some. I just think that
Sometimes people need to look at other options.
And I want to be clear, you could still do it, but the pay is the same as HPC. So it doesn't mean you'd have to eliminate it.
Right.
It's just the pay would be the same. But anyway,
What is Mr.
we don't want to get off on that.
I have lots of thoughts on it, but, I think small counties are bigger than big counties in some ways, and we're mid-sized counties. There's families that you have conversations with that are very adamant, we're not gonna do it, these are reasons, they've had bad situations in the past. Making that a requirement doesn't fix the situation. You start forcing people like privatization, downsizing, you force people into a place they don't wanna be, which becomes worse for families and individuals. I know a lot of people working with new people coming in, I hear that all the time. Let's start with new people on waivers, let's introduce it, not people moving on with 30 years, let's start fresh in the beginning.
But we've talked about this, even today, there's never any mention of special training for families. And you, of course, are the perfect guy because you serve on Erie County Board, right?
You've been caught on tape.
Because, and your son, and you had the experience, and you really pushed that in your county. And we haven't done the training for families and policy or from council as well. I'm sure that's something that council would like to do. Give it to them firsthand, because that should be our goal, and we could help pay for that.
one of the things we did do in Hamilton County, we just had a provider fair, and we it was for our SSAs, but then we did invite, and we had remote support vendors were present at that. And we did invite families, and had a good amount of families come in. Who were able to then learn about remote supports, and then we are putting together. It won't happen until after the first of the year, but we're putting together a family information session as well, so that specific to remote supports, families can come in. Part of the smart home that we're putting together, we'll be setting up tours with families and SSAs, and then also we're doing a video, like a training video for the smart home that then would be able to be accessed by families, and we're going to be doing regional lunch and learn sessions that families will be welcome at as well. So.
And Director, there are going to be several of the smart home or some of the smart homes in those new grants?
I think, do you have one in Miami or out in that?
Shelby,
okay. But, and so there's another one popping up in Wood County. I think
would
there's,
be really good.
so I think there's in the planning for 3 or 4 or so around the state.
Yeah.
You were pointing at Brian, weren't you?
Yeah.
The one at Shelby.
And Nightcrawler, I think, was looking at one as well, right, Paula?
Yeah, because they invited me to come up
Okay.
and actually do a show.
Okay. That would
How
be
they
good.
get used is another thing that I think might want to go into planning. So they can be used in multiple different ways.
Right.
So folks, I think we've done exactly what we needed to do with this. We heard this presentation, and you're starting to think about, all right, what might be some benchmarks that we could establish as a council that would help other counties begin to approach and develop it at a pace comparable. You have touched on a number of areas, and most recently how we use remote homes, integrating a conversation into the annual planning process, engaging families, right? You've touched on a number of content areas for possible benchmarks. We'll revisit that this afternoon so that we leave the session having named all the topics of possible benchmarks. So I've been keeping notes, I'm sure you have as well, and we'll use this afternoon and next session to say, based on what we've heard today, what are possible benchmarks. Thank you, Allison and Lee.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Adam, we have you up next.
Okay.
And I feel less guilty about interrupting part of your time or taking part of your time.
No, yeah, I'll make.
Because you are part of really
Right.
the same story.
Right.
Adam is with Total Home Care Solutions, THS, that you've heard referenced. And as Kyle and I talked with Adam about joining us today, one of the things we were clear about is this is not a vendor presentation, because we've had that. We've been there and done that. But there were two specific questions that came up last time that we've asked Adam's insights about today. And one was your recognition of the last session that this organization is unique because they started out as a HPC vendor and entered into remote supports as well. So Kathy, you last time said that's pretty interesting as a possible way to engage more providers going forward. So we wanted to hear from you about that
Great.
experience. And then the second thing that we asked Adam to speak to has already been raised today, and that's the issue of remote supports and settings that serve more than one person. So he's going to offer perspectives on that as well. So we'll take about 15 minutes if that's okay.
Oh yeah. I'll make it short and sweet. I'm Adam. I'm with THS, and we started about 10 years ago in Hamilton County. And we kind of started in supported living, obviously. We grew that, and we worked kind of all the way up to Miami County, so we got a couple locations. So we, it turned into a pretty large operation, which comes with its own challenges. And about 14, 15, with the changes in the legislation, with the overtime exemptions, things got pretty bad. I mean, we were, I remember sitting around thinking, how are we going to survive? Because the overtime was going to, looking at the numbers, it was going to be either over or we got to look at something else. So we were brainstorming, how can we survive? We had 400 or 500 employees that we pay weekly, and we never had to worry. We really depended heavily on that overtime exemption, that companionship exemption for the on-site on-call. So obviously that was the first thing we thought about, like how could we stop losing money at nighttime? And this was a gift. It's like, well, we had heard about it, but we had never, been approached about it. This is, 4 or 5 years ago. And it's like, how do we get into this? So we started looking into it, and we met with a couple vendors, and, honestly, looking back on it, if someone would have came to me and said, hey, I can take all your on-site on-call, I would have given it to them. No question asked. I mean, it's not good business. It's something we had to do to grow our business and take care of our folks. And there are some conveniences about it, some morning time stuff, things like that. But so we met with some vendors, and we thought, we've always been interested in technology. We've always used it in our supported living business already, and it kind of excited us that maybe we could be part of the solution and not only help our business, but help our folks, the folks we take care of. So it was really intended just to do our own people, just to work with the folks, to put it out there as an option, to try to drive it, to get rid of some of the on-site on-call for the folks that we thought, that we know, we've been caring for years, that we know that they could probably do it safely. And it was nice because we had a chance to kind of test out some technology, figure out what system we wanted to go with, how we're going to work it, how's it going to be monitored, how are we going to fix issues that arise from technology standpoints, backup. It's a complicated beast to monitor. But it was nice because we had some controlled environments where we could practice and see if this is something we could do. And it worked out so well for a lot of our individuals. We were really enjoying it, and we really liked the technology piece. And so it kind of took off on its own tangent, and we were able to kind of dedicate a lot of resources and time towards growing it. Again, mostly for folks we care for. So, but then in this year, we it was just starting to get some steam, and we were at a place where we thought we could maybe start working with other providers, and we're local, so we're in Hamilton County, so we had a good relationship with some folks, and so we really started dedicating a lot more time and effort towards partnering, and we also started with Miami County a couple years ago. We were fortunate to work in a couple counties that were way ahead of the curve on this thing, and really were open to ideas of how to really implement this thing safely, effectively, So we were really lucky in that standpoint. But, so some of the challenges, obviously, it's a substantial upfront cost. It's been challenging. It's the hardest I've worked in years. I mean, it's 24 hours a day. It's, internet goes down here. How are we going to fix it? It's how do you create a monitoring center 24 hours a day? And how is your technology going to reach your folks? How are you going to reach out? How are you going to document? There's three huge components of this: installation, maintenance, repairs, monitoring, and then there's the documentation, the rules piece, meetings, and getting it out there. So you got I'm at meetings daily, just presenting it, and there's a lot of travel time involved, so on and so forth. So it's a big operation. It's turned into a fun operation, but it is very challenging, I think, to get started. I think a big part of it would be the technology first. Like, what are you going to use? How are you going to use it? And then I think some guidance. We've even talked to some providers. We built our own kind of back-end software that takes a lot of technology, sucks it into our system, so we could use something off the shelf as long as they could generate a text, email, something that we could suck it in and document on it, report on it. We've talked to some of the larger providers about if you're ever interested in starting your own, maybe we could support you from a technology standpoint and help with more of the consulting piece, or because there's a lot of larger providers we work with that they could do it themselves. They have the manpower, and they have the experience to do it. So I've always liked that aspect of maybe in the future, if there's another option for providers, if I'm working with them, maybe we teach them how to use the equipment, how to purchase the equipment. The equipment's already installed. Maybe they could just take over the monitoring piece, so it'll be a smooth transition. So we've thought of some ideas of how to get other HPC providers involved. Everyone I've spoken to isn't interested right now, but I think as they get more familiar with it, as they see the financial benefits of it, I think they will. I just think it'll take some time in the future. Obviously, there's a risk to reputation. There's there's financial risk. When we started this, it was really just going to be a small operation and to try to help our supported living business. And I talk to people what we're getting into, and they're like, "Well, I hope you're insured." And it's like, it seems risky, and I guess in some ways it is. I don't think it's any more or less risky than supported living. In fact, I think it's probably less risky. I have more control over the folks that are monitoring. They're right there in my office. I can manage them better. I can pay them better. I mean, we can pay a lot better wage, so I can get better folks, I feel like, that are dependable, and they're there. They report to my office. It's more of they seem to enjoy it. They like talking to our folks. We have the video tablets or whatever. I mean, it's you go out in this monitoring center, and they're talking to folks, or they know our folks very well. It's really a fun environment. You're not out there maybe by yourself with someone in a supported living environment. But they still have the same relationships, and some of the impacts that we've seen with our individuals, and just not having staff, sleeping on the couch, or being there watching their TV. I mean, there's a lot of positives that we've seen with a lot of our guys and gals that really enjoy it. So that's an overview. I want to keep it short for questions, but it's been a fun experience, and it's really, I think, a part of the solution, and I'm enjoying it. I love supported living, but this has been an exciting thing to try and maybe to innovate on, and technology is only going to keep getting better, and I feel like this needs to happen. I think this is going to have to be a part of everybody's plan in some way, even if it's an hour or two, you know, it's gonna have to be a part of their lives in some way to help them. And to keep things more cost effective and to give them a chance to try it out there on their own in a safe way. And I also feel this is a nice step down to, you know, if they're doing well, it's a great step to nobody there. And I think that's gonna happen time and time again. It's like, you know, a couple of years, I don't think we need to monitor you anymore. So I think it'll continue to increase independence and get better. But any questions? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Could you speak to the supporting people, two or more who live in the same center?
Yeah. You know, we have several, but it's always been a situation where both are great candidates. I don't think I've ever come across a situation where one wants it and one doesn't yet, but we don't have a lot of sites. We really don't. It seems like they've always been on board with the whole situation and everybody's game for it, or you know, there hasn't been a lot of trying to figure out are they both capable or not yet. But I see that being certainly an issue, something I never really thought about. Yeah. Sorry, I can't be more helpful with that, but
Yeah, I think it's just that next barrier.
right.
That next barrier of what are we going to do, and you know, the way we think differently.
Right.
And maybe it is like what Steve said, go with new, you know, and change it from there going forward. But
Funding can be broken out, you know, so it's not part of the site. It is, we do have situations where we do monitor one person at a DRA site, because that can be broken out just to be their funding. And that seems to work. Now the other folks that live there can, and I guess that they need to utilize some of the technology they can, but it's primarily put in place for that person in that home.
But the other person doesn't have HPC staff.
Right.
At the time.
Right,
That's
exactly right, you're right.
That's the issue.
You're absolutely right,
Yeah. Yeah.
Question for you, do you see a barrier, not the biggest barrier, but a barrier, being for a provider side, being I hire you to do the remote monitoring or the backup,
Right.
being the barrier?
Yes. Oh yeah, it's until you get used to it and you start getting comfortable with one or two, it's a huge barrier. I mean, they don't want to be the backup. I've had it nonstop, you know, I don't want to mess with it. And I try to explain to them how beneficial this is. Now, maybe the one or two person isn't that beneficial, but you get four on it and it starts to become a huge swing, and not only are you losing money, you know, now you're making money. It's an $8 swing from OSOC to remote supports. And
Yeah, I think the secret is eliminating that fear from the provider side.
Right.
For being the backup. What do you think, and I'll just share it because we're all friends, no one's taking notes. What do you think about if there was a possibility that a couple providers in per county created a business model that just focused on being the backup? So, you know, Steve's you're running an agency, I'm running an agency. I'm your backup for your individual during the night. I'm providing the staff because you don't want to do it or don't have enough staff or whatever. When you multiply that as a business model, I'm letting it out bad, Director, you know, you start doing that for multiple people, and it could be a decent business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because I think okay.
Yeah, we've talked to, you know, like a couple situations up north where we partner with ViaQuest right now. And I would reach out to them, even if it's someone else's 830 HPC provider or someone else is providing daytime hours. You know, if they don't want to be backup, I don't have backup in Akron, but they do potentially. And they could make $4 an hour just being ready, and I partner with them anyway to be backup for that individual, if everybody approves that. So it's a big problem, and a lot of folks.
Because I targeted 5 providers in all parts of the state, and we're going to meet and start talking about that.
Awesome, yeah.
And if we could set up the model, we believe that it might help with just getting this thing off the ground. Take away, because just like you said, man, you know, if one person comes with a negative attitude, it could probably freaking provider comes in, the family's going to follow that negative. You know, everybody would, anybody would. If we can eliminate that from the provider side, so that I'm not so scared about remote monitoring in the sites that I have, I don't have to be the backup.
Right.
We'll hire that out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we've been talking about lately so much, is our unified fronts.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's probably one of the biggest hang-ups is who's gonna provide backup, and, you know, as much as you try to explain the benefits, you still get a lot of pushback. You know, which I understand. I mean, you know, when someone came to me and said, well, I'm gonna call you at 2 a.m., you gotta send somebody out there, it's like, no thanks, you know? When I can tell them that rarely or if ever, we may not call you.
Well, that's what I would wonder, if you'd say, if you're just there, it's just routine, once in a million years you'll have to go, but they're just very nervous.
Sure.
Yeah, but you still have to be ready.
You gotta be ready.
To
You
go,
gotta-
if you
you
gotta
gotta be
go,
ready
you gotta
'cause-
go, I
Yep.
see.
Yeah.
I mean, then we're talking MUI.
Yeah, and that's the other part, that's that fear of who's responsible. I mean, you get that from the SSA end as well.
Yeah.
You know, when you have these conversations sometimes about utilizing remote monitoring, and then you have like 4 pages in a person-centered plan of how it's gonna all play out, and who's responsible, and who's gonna do this, and who's gonna, you know, it's that responsibility piece on the provider end and the SSA, you know, CYAing themselves pretty much and adding all this additional into the plan when it's supposed to be increasing independence.
Whoa, I
It
didn't
sometimes
see
doesn't
that.
get that way,
Yeah.
and it does happen.
Yeah.
And I also think too, like you have to be careful sometimes of having too many cooks in the kitchen from a family perspective. If you start having 4 providers in a plan, who do I call when something is going on? If I want to change something, like, you know, I think it's great, you know, to make it easier from a service delivery standpoint, but from the end user to then look at try to figure out, do I call Jamie or do I call, like, who do I call at this point in time of the day when I need something?
Right, you could sell it though.
Sure.
You could sell it as a provider backup. You know, in that, yeah, I'm the provider of record from midnight to 7. But let's say something happens and their staff doesn't show up at 3, I could turn that back on and be the provider for an hour or whatever. So it is a backup for the fear of staff not showing up.
No, I think it definitely alleviates a lot.
But
of
not
it.
4 providers. I'm talking
Right.
1 provider, no VRS.
I just think as you start introducing more and more pieces to this, you're introducing the HPC provider, you're introducing the backup provider, you're introducing a vendor, like, it's just more.
Good point.
More folks to keep track of from a family perspective.
Yeah, good point.
I think, sorry, I was gonna say real quick too, I think the families, the reason that we've had success once the providers have bought into it is because the families trust the provider that has been in their home.
Yeah.
And so if they're saying, I'm not in agreement, I'm not gonna do the backup, but here's another agency that will, I think you're gonna have some resistance with the family because they trust the people that have been in their home already.
Yeah.
In some situations.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good, honest discussion of all parties.
I think what's helped us grow, at least in Hamilton County and some of our local, where we have offices, is that we are able to pick up that backup because the conversation would have stopped there if the provider would say, well, I'm not, I don't want to do backup. But we were able to say, we don't mind doing it just to get this started. If you ever want to take it over in the future, we don't really want to do that, but it stops. Things stop immediately. So we were able to kind of say, yes, we'll do it just to get this thing started. And that's one benefit of getting more HPC providers, vendors, because they have support staff that they could do their own backup.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to partner, and we got folks in our office
And I'm
that are
able
just
to
there.
pay them a little extra
Right.
to rotate it so that
You just schedule.
it can work.
Yeah.
So how many counties are you in?
We do most of Hamilton and Miami, Montgomery. We do some in Fayette. We're southeast. We do a few in a couple in Akron, but we've primarily been focused on the southeast region.
So you can be in a county, you can sit in a county, but the provider backup can be
Correct.
up here somewhere.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
that's the key.
Right, like with ViaQuest, they got an office everywhere, so they would be our backup, they would be our boots on the ground, so if we needed assistance, we call them up in Akron, let them know to dispatch staff.
So this is about partnerships, you're right. It's
Oh my
gotta
gosh.
be.
And it's also about, actually, how can we boost this thing off the ground? It's overwhelming if you are the remote support agency and the backup and you're trying to run your own agency. There is an opportunity, I'm just putting it out there, I think there's an opportunity to partner, and it's not so overwhelming.
Right.
Thus, we can boost this thing
Right.
going,
Right.
across.
And
any
everybody
county.
wins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we get across the state, then we all win, right? That's what you've been trying to do.
Absolutely. Adam, I got a question for you. When you're working with those provider agencies, what's the best way to change their mind? What luck have you had? Is it mostly, here, look at these numbers and profitability, or is that, I mean, I would, my opinion, as someone who hasn't done it, I would think that would be the easiest way to do it, but I was curious what your experience was since you've actually had those conversations.
I think it's a big part of it. Is a lot of folks maybe aren't as number savvy as maybe I am, because I enjoy the numbers, but it just helping educate them on the numbers and overtime and healthcare and what on-site on-call does and how are we going to stay competitive in this new environment. We have to save as much money as we can so we can pay as much as we can during the daytime hours, and that was our goal with this. We, if we're going to keep growing, we have to start competing, and we can't be offering what we're offering now. But we're losing thousands over here. If we could take that and maybe even make a little bit more, shift that towards the daytime, where we can start increasing those wages and start being a better employer, was really the ultimate goal. I think that's the biggest thing. You still get a lot of kind of blank stares, and so some of the smaller ones, and it's funny. I've realized that a lot of folks, they may not be following the DOL requirements, some of the smaller providers, so they're not worried about some of the overtime issues. I also realized that, they like the on-site on-call. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. That's bad. And, until you have a DOL come in, it's all good, right? It's like, hey, I'll do what I got to do to survive. But when they walk in that door, and I've had it happen.
It's scary, me too.
It is scary, man, and you will never go back. And I tell them that. I'm like, I'm not going to give any advice, but follow the rules, because it will shut you down. They will ask for everything and then some. But then I've realized that they use it for staffing. So they'll do evenings, and then they'll do the same person at night. So they'll have the same staff do that 16-hour shift, so there's less transition. Someone already there in the mornings. It seems great on paper. Like, that makes sense. Staff maybe works 3 days a week, and they work evenings, they sleep at night, or they only work a couple days a week, get their hours. But financially, it's just not viable unless you're not paying according to the rules. Because if you're paying according to the rules, you're losing $6, $7 an hour.
Plus, if they're doing that for you, they get off at 7 in the morning, then they come to work for me for first shift.
Right.
Now they've been no sleep.
Awake for, yeah.
Adam, thank you.
You're welcome.
So
You're welcome.
much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
In that 25 minutes, we hit on a lot of possible strategies to address some of the problems that you named in your survey, Steve, and other that we have named in previous meetings. So again, good grist for the mill for our afternoon when we start to say, what do we want to develop benchmarks around? And we'll come back to this later. Gonna step out. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
We will let Allison and Lee turn their chairs over to our Miami County friends and call you folks up next. Many of you know Brian Green, Superintendent of Miami County. Brian has brought Jessica. And Jessica, your position is SSA Director. And just as a reminder, for the context of the invitation that we extended to Brian, we have in our deliverables from the governor a request to consider how technology can be incorporated along the lifespan, and particularly at times of transition. So many of you also know that Ohio is a community of practice state for charting the life course, and Brian and Miami County have been leaders, have been pioneers in that space. So their time with us is to talk about their integration of this process of charting the life course with their focus on technology.
Joe, you always have great segues. When we were asked to actually present today, I was kind of racking my brain about how do we really tie a lot of these tools together, and how do we utilize the life course tools with the regular SSA meetings and trying to dig out that information. And it really kind of boils down to, I think, just some of the earlier days where we were just concentrated more on listening a lot better to the individuals that we serve, and having a good set of tools to be able to kind of explore out those needs and give the SSAs that kind of capability to be able to have that conversation with families. And when I went to the life course tools first seminar that Shelley had taught, I think it may have been 3 years ago, I was selfishly watching the presentation as a parent because I have a son who was just getting ready to go into that sort of independence in his life. And I thought, geez, these are really asking a lot of really good questions that are making me think a little bit further outside of the box than what I think I would have normally done. And it's just a standard IEP or ISP meeting that we would have. So one of the things that we decided to do was to bring it back to our county, and we started that process with the advocates that we had showing up. We had a pretty good sizable group there. And we started to walk them through some of the just basic, simple tools, and I hope I had enough of these to pass around. But there's 3 tools that we utilize pretty heavily with folks. One is the one-page profile, and it's really wonderful. We have some videos, I think, that the state's really shot of some of the folks that we have that they're in our county. They really talk about how, a little bit tells the support staff more about them, their SSA more about how to support them. And then the second page we have, and I like the simplicity of this, is the life trajectory. What looks like a good life for me, and what might not look like a good life for me in the long term, and what are the things that I can do to try to get myself towards those goals that I have, and write those down and actually put it on paper, and then take that information to your SSA, to your DSPs, to anybody that is part of your support staff. And I think the lady that teaches this at our advocacy calls it paper courage for the individuals. They can actually come in, they have something on paper, and they can take it to the meetings. And so what I really liked about this is it just kind of woke up our whole organization from the county board's end. And we've always had kind of a culture with our SSA department and with staff that we really encourage our folks to stick their necks out and have that customer service orientation for the individuals that we serve, and to try things that might not always seem comfortable. And one of the wonderful things about this tool here is it also has an integrated support services model, and that is literally what we've been talking about, I think, today. It looks at not just all government services, which is in this bottom section here, which we're used to doing. We can write a plan, we can probably plan all the HPC, put the waiver in action, and have somebody assist somebody through that whole, but it's just not the best part of that person's holistic plan. So we really start asking ourselves questions. What are the types of talents, and what can that person do that's on their own that can contribute to that plan? What are the relationships that they have? Can we involve the family a bit more into the process? And then the community-based types of supports are there. And then the one other piece that really we're talking about today is the technology component. What's out there that this person can really benefit from? And this is an active sheet that our SSAs also include in the 90-day packets that go out as they go through the ISP process annually. And they can elect to use this tool with the individual. But it's what I think I've liked about it so much is that even if it doesn't always make itself out, we've already got our SSAs thinking in this type of a mindset. And so I'm going to probably turn this over to Jessica, and she can kind of cover what our history is with how we've started to use remote supports and how that might tie into how we've been using these tools.
You want to drive that?
Drive.
I don't have a clicker, so.
It's high tech.
I know, it's getting in its way. Well, as Joe said, Brian, Jessica, the SSA director, yay. We're a lot smaller than Hamilton County. We have 22 SSAs, 3 SSA managers. We have a system support group that does billing, so on and so forth. I won't bore you with any money talk. If you'll flip me to the next one. I just wanted to talk about, when he said come out and talk about remote supports, first of all, Adam, very familiar, sidekick Jimmy, they hear from me a lot because I am, okay, this is going to be probably the worst thing to say in front of this group. I hate technology, but I love remote support. Back in 2012, and I'll be honest, and with all due respect, I have to, and I warn Brian, but when I get up and talk about remote support, I always say this. So, I've been seeing a lot of things come out about remote support, and then Ohio's a technology first, and so Brian talks, we have, executive team meetings every week, and they're talking about it, I'm kind of over there, I'm listening, I'm doing my thing, and I said, I don't understand why this is so complicated. We've been at this for a long, long time, and we started before 2012, but 2012 was the first big case, and I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek. And I want to talk about Jim for a minute. I actually come from the provider world. I was a program spec and a direct care staff at an agency, and Jim was on my caseload there. Well, then I moved into the county board as an SSA. Jim was on my caseload there. So I had the luxury of having Jim in my life. Matter of fact, my nickname to Jim, and you can call him right now and say my name, he'll say, oh, the devil woman. And it's not because we had such a love-hate relationship. But I think the deal with Jim, he's 65 years old now, so rewind 5 years, 6 years. 65 years old. He has cerebral palsy. He stands over 6'5". He's a pretty big dude. Gait, very unsteady. Seizures all the time. Falls all the time. I'll never forget the one time we were walking out of a doctor's appointment. He rolled across the hood of a car because he was walking so fast he couldn't get stopped, and I sure as heck wasn't going to break his fall. And he hops right back up and he's like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. So when we talked about remote support with Jim, and like I said, I could probably talk about Jim all day, but I think the key is Jim just wanted to be left alone. He didn't want people all up in his space. He didn't want people all up in his business. So it was a natural thing. And see, his parents were over 70. So a lot of people say, well, we got to target young folks, or we got to target young parents, or we got to do... No. Jim he's an older dude, and his parents, now they're over 80 years old. And I think the sales pitch was, hey, can you guys just try this? Can you just try this? Because I just had this feeling like it would give Jim the satisfaction that he needed. However, the team said there's risks. I love the risks, sorry. ISP, risk summary, risk assessment, I risk all day. He has seizures, he falls, he hurts himself, constantly having issues. But what kind of hit it one day is that he had been saying, leave me alone, leave me alone, leave me alone, but the team was saying he needs 24-hour care because he has risks. Well, one day he had enough and he did hurt someone. He did go to jail. So, Mom and Dad did bail him out, and I said to them, and we have had a relationship for years again, so I said, okay, so now are you ready to try it? He's trying to tell you something, leave him alone. So they said, okay, what does it look like? Now again, rewind, this is years and years ago when we started remote support. We've been at this for a long time, and this isn't our first rodeo, this isn't the first time we've done it in 2018. So we had taken a tour over in Indiana somewhere, the provider agency. At the time I was an SSA supervisor, and they said, hey, you want to go on this tour over to Indiana? And I think the superintendent before Brian said, well, you look like you need something to do, go over there and check this remote support and stuff out. Well, I fell in love with it. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Of course, the boxes were like these big brown obtrusive things in the house, but I just thought it was so cool because those folks over in Indiana kept saying, well, hey, nobody's in my space. I was like, man, that'd be great for Jim. So anyway, so we did remote supports, but guess what? And I don't know if I want you to flip to the next slide because I probably don't, but the thing about Jim is we don't have, this is another bad news thing I have to break to you guys, is we don't have a formal assessment. We don't have any formal process. I'm going to talk about my process in a minute. But the good news about Jim is he does have some risks, he does have some things that need to happen. So in the morning, sorry, and I feel rushed all the time, but in the morning, HBC staff comes in. Get him up, get him motivated, yay, Jim, you want some breakfast, hey, hang out. They leave. All day long, he has remote support. In the evening, somebody comes back in, passes his meds, so on and so forth. He might want to go to the movies. He might want to go to McDonald's or he needs a ride. They go do that. They come back and they do their thing, and just about the time he's over them, they've left. So there is no issues, there's no altercations, and then all night he's on remote support. Guess what? In the almost 7 years he's had remote support, he has fallen, he has been injured, he has had several seizures, but the deal is it's the way you think about it. So I've heard a lot about barriers, and we've been talking about that all day. So the team kept saying there's all these barriers. Yeah, but there's really not. When you sit down you think, okay, what if he has a seizure? Well, that guy on the camera, Jim has cameras in his home. I should have mentioned that. He has cameras, sensors, he's got everything you want. Somebody on that camera, they can call 911. So I'm able to give Jim what he wants, get people away from me. I just want to be retired and leave me alone. And then they can call 911. he's also formed a great relationship with the Tip City Police Department. They still, to this day, for the last 6 years, have stopped every once in a while. Like every month, I'll get an email from a Tip City police officer that says, "Hey, we saw Jim sitting in his front window, stopped and said hey tonight." They know they're on camera. He has formed a friendship. Instead of, he went from being arrested by them to now they're all best buddies. But they don't have to go over there for a negative reason, so they've become friends. So it's really cool things. The other thing is his case forces the SSAs to constantly be thinking. So we always think of barriers. Not that long ago, he fell and hit his head and was injured pretty badly in the bathroom in the middle of the night. Well, camera can't see him. So his mom and dad, God love his mom, she called him and she called me. She skipped the SSA, she skipped the manager, she called me and she said, "I'm gonna tell you what." I said, "I'll meet you out there, we'll look at the bathroom and see what the problem is." Well, if you run the video footage of him getting injured in the middle of the night, the only thing you can see is his little white socks in the air. Wanna know why? Guess what Jim does in the middle of the night? He has to use the restroom. He doesn't turn on the light. So we went out, and this is outside of remote support. It's a mod. We went out there and put sensors in his bathroom for the light switch. So if you're constantly thinking, and we'll talk about that in a minute too, you can overcome the barriers. I think people like to get hung up and say, "Well, this is going to happen, this is going to happen." Yeah, right. It is going to happen. All kinds of stuff's going to happen. Stuff happens as Jim I didn't even think of, and I've been on this for 6 years. So bringing forward, so right now we have 16 active cases. I want to note that we have had over 30 people use remote support. And Brian and I were back there and I said, I'd love to hear, and I think Hamilton County said it, they said people have ability out or whatever phrase you want to use, but the majority of the people that have used remote support that we've had, they've had it, and now they just have like drop-in HPC services. Because we thought, oh, they need all these services, and then they kind of went to remote support and tried it. One thing that we're very consistent with Hamilton on, and have been for 6+ years, is that do not commit to anything. You try it. You try it. And the county board, it's their responsibility to have relationships with people and also mean what they say. So if Jim's mom, when he said, "Will you try this?" Yes. When he said, "When you try this?" Yes. She'll try it, but she said, "If it doesn't work, Jessica, you better take it back out of this house." And I said, "I will, as long as you'll be patient and we'll do it." So you got to stick to your word too, and it isn't for everybody. And out of those 30+ people that have used it, it didn't work for some folks. So it's up in the air. You want to flip me? I'll get off my tangent about Jim. I love Jim. So our process. This looks kind of different than a bunch of forms. I'm sorry. But again, I always tell Brian, I said, "Oh, my version is super not complicated." So, team discussion and safety planning. The way that we look at remote supports is we aren't targeting anyone. And again, we're smaller. My numbers, we have 615 people that are active with an SSA, and we have 489 with funding. So waiver of all kind, local funding. So that's where we're at with our numbers. But the team discussion and safety planning means if you're an SSA and you've hit a roadblock and you're like, "I have this case, what do I do?" Well, they're talking to their friends, which is their teammates, they're talking to their managers, they're talking to myself, behavior support coordinators, housing coordinators, whoever is involved in that person's life, parents, providers, saying, "Hey, we've hit a roadblock," and then somebody says, "Have you tried remote supports?" No? Is that an option? Yes. So that's really how it's been happening. And then brainstorming, looking at options, and trying anything once. Again, I am very, very blessed. The reason why that Jim's story even got off the ground is, I'll be honest with you, we had to spend money to make a point, to show that it was going to work. But eventually, if you fast forward, if Jim, we knew his needs were going to be 24/7 eventually, so we got ahead of it, we were lucky. But I will say that I drove the superintendent before Brian, really I drove her nuts. I would follow her around when I'd pass her in the hallway. I'd be like, "You want to try that remote support thing?" At the time it was remote monitoring. And I'd say, "We really need to do that." And finally she just gave in and was like, "Just do whatever you want, leave me alone." And Brian, I'm very blessed to have the support and the understanding of technology from him. And he has never tried to say, "Look, you guys have to target everybody in an on-site on-call situation," whatever, because we've been doing it, and I think the word was mentioned, it's very organic for us, because, again, I think it's because we're small enough we're able to do that. So by trying anything once and brainstorming, looking at all the options, remote support is introduced to every single person we serve as an option. Someone over there said that while we were talking earlier, and genius, yep, it has to be. It It has to be on the list of services. It has to be on the list of things you've tried. So when the folks that we serve, the majority of those people are, and I'm going to use this, I'm going to do some air quotes, they have behaviors where they are difficult. Okay, I'll be honest with you. I've been married for 17 years and I have teenagers. I just want people to leave me alone too.
Hey.
I may not punch someone, but if a person we serve is saying, I know, right? If a person is saying, I want to be left alone, it's our job to listen. And then it's our job to solve the problem. That's how we work with SSAs. So people attempted suicide. We've had screwdrivers taken out their staff's cars. And guess what? That's how you get providers to buy in real quick. And the other thing, the other reason that's working in our favor right now, but it's very sad, and I'll be honest with you, is the provider shortage. In Miami County, we have agencies just can't get staff. So they right away are coming to Adam. Adam's you have a lot of partnerships in Miami County. Just out of 7 sites, each one of them has a different residential provider, and they all team with THS. So they get along perfectly fine. We're watching emails, and like overnight, THS remote support staff will report to the entire team. They all talk to each other, they all call each other. It's really, really simple. But again, I think they've almost, and again, it's sad, but they've been forced into that a little bit because of the provider shortage. So that's been another kind of situation. Brian mentioned the life course tools. The life course tools, okay, again, have to be honest, we love the life course tools because it was something that came into Miami County that represents what we kind of do. So what I did before I came out, I don't know, a while back ago, so I pulled everybody's life course tools that's on remote support. Not one life course tool said, I want remote support, or remote support is important to me, or important for me, or whatever the case may be. But what it did say, and I made some notes, I want alone time, I want space, I want to feel independent, I want to be independent, I want patience. It says what I don't want, which was so funny. And some of them were kind of comical because I just love the SSAs when they do the life course tools. They learn something new every single time they pull them out because again, as people we evolve, and in a year somebody might try 10 things and then they realize, like I don't want cheese on my cheeseburger. That doesn't so much correspond with that, but it's all facts of life. But anyway, they say I want people to stay out of my business. I want people to leave me alone. So they didn't say remote support, but I'm like, hey, do you want to try remote support? Well, what's remote support? Back to Jim. Recently, there was a young lady who uses remote support, and I think THS is the provider of that. She has REM during the day, and she already had it overnight. That's how we kind of started it with her. Well, she wants more. Okay, so she goes to day service all day. She comes home, lets herself in, and she's like, I really don't want anybody there then. So it's like, well, her name's Michelle. It's like, what do you want? I just need somebody to help me eat, like make sure I have food. And she does microwave things, but she was want help cooking a meal, and I really need my medications. Okay, that's not that complicated. I mean, she's happy as a lark. So she was able to identify, and she actually, again, back to Jim. Jim was our salesman. In Shelby County, they do have the remote support, model home, things like that. That's always been an option for us to go view it, but I will tell you, it is much more beneficial when you have a gym, because Michelle, I just took her over to Jim's, myself and the SSA for Jim were there, so 3 of us, we all met over there. Michelle walks in, and we said, so, Jim, you want to tell Michelle about your cameras? Yeah. So we were like, well, we're going to go over to the kitchen and chat about some other stuff, you guys hang out. Sure enough, I mean, he's so proud of it. I mean, you wouldn't know until you kind of push him to talk about it, but he told her all about it. Next thing you know, they're over in front of his tablet hanging on the wall, and they're talking to the guy, and Michelle is standing there asking the remote support person questions. And the remote support person's in a different, but that's Syngistics, and they're in a different state. They're having a conversation. I was like, well, Jim is really the salesman. So by seeing it actively work, and that's what we've done, so that kind of was like, that's smart. So just take them over and they can go see Jim. We also take people to different sites depending on what kind of equipment they want to try. So it's very organic. That's the word we always use. None of it's forced. And again, I've been blessed not have to really push. It's just like a situation will happen, and SSA feels like they've hit a And he's in slipper socks already. He does wear the non-slid socks. But he never turns the light on when he goes to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Just this one time, he caught himself on something and that was it. Well now, not only does the light illuminate the path for him, but it's illuminating it so that the guys on the camera can see what's going on. And then reviewing service continuously, that life course out all the time, talking about it all the time, looking at it all the time, multiple eyes. What are we missing? We're always thinking. And then being person-centered. The gentleman in the peach shirt, yep, he mentioned that earlier. Where is this in the big person-centered plan? It runs the person-centered plan. Remote supports are very person-centered because all the folks that we serve that have it, they've picked it out. They've made their own decision. They've basically just given us a message. We've received it. We've listened. That's the most important part. What are they trying to tell us? We've tried it. And we've allowed them the freedom to say, I don't want it or I want it. And the majority of the people that we serve, they are their own guardians. We don't have all of they just get to try things, not a lot of layers, not a lot of scary folks. Jim does have legal guardians. And they want Jim to be safe, but they realize that it's more important to say, what do you want Jim as a grown man, instead of, oh no, he might fall down today. It took time, and again, I had a relationship with them for over 10 years, so it was kind of a natural progression. I will say that we spend some local funds on remote support type things. We have 3 young folks that are 3 young girls, I guess they're in their early 20s, to me that's young, but they're moving out together for the first time. And they ask, the one thing they are scared to death of is like, what if someone comes to the front door? So the SSA comes and says, hey, the parents and the girls are asking, hey, can we put a camera outside, or can we do remote support? And I was like, can I ask you a question? SSA says, yeah. I said, do they all know how to work iPhones? And I know the girls well enough to know I'm already asking probably a dumb question. I said, yeah, they all have iPhones. They're all in our advocacy group. Like, they're smarter than we are with their phones. And I said, well, then you don't need remote support. Do they just need we need to buy a camera? What do we need? And they're like, yeah, because all they want it to do, so IT guy, yay, he's super smart. He says just buy one of, I don't know what they're called, I'm showing how dumb I am in technology, but putting the camera in the doorbell. So if someone comes to their door, sensor throws the camera on, it's gonna light up their iPhones and they're able to look from inside their house. They already get the concept, so they don't need the remote support service. So we might spend a few $100s and just do a camera in the front of the house and then they're set. It also makes the parents feel better, is that if there's some sort of security, the girls know how to look at their iPhones and see who's out there. And in advocacy, they've learned not to let strangers in, to ask the right questions when people come to the door. If they see somebody at the door and they're scared, they can call 911, they can call mom, they can call whoever. So instead of kind of going, so I guess it's remote support in a sense, but it's not service by definition. So kind of got to think outside the box. And we do have and what do we say? I always tell Brian it's a generational shift, because the young parents, here they come, and all these young folks know how to work iPhones and all this technology, and I'm schooled every day. Remember I said I had teenagers. So they're teaching me all kinds of things all the time. So we're kind of meeting that group of parents in a different way, because they're already kind of open, aware, exposed to it. So what they're asking us is, what can we do with it? So then here comes Adam, here comes Syngestics, here comes every vendor we have. We'll give them to them and say, this is what your options are. So then they can make their own decision on what they want to try. But again, it may not take funding. It may take a few $100s to set them up with whatever, app or piece of equipment, and then they can monitor it themselves. So we have that going on now. Guy comes home from school every day. We help them purchase the equipment. Dad checks on him from work. He just wants the safety that, hey, my son made it in the house. He doesn't need funding. He doesn't need, remote support service. So it's a big gamut. I think we're at questions slide. Questions? Sorry, I talked very fast, but I didn't want to hold you guys up.
You said it didn't work for everybody. Who was somebody that didn't work for? You're so ingenious at it, I can't imagine you didn't.
Well, typically it's some sort of medical thing that we've overlooked. You just can't get away, and I think someone said on-site on-call. There are folks that we serve, and again, there's, with DC's closing and serving folks that have such high medical needs in the community, there's such a supervision level, and to be honest with you, they don't have very big on-site on-call time.
Yeah.
They're mostly HPC anyways. So we've tried some things and we've realized that people have aged and they've had health situations come up. That's really been our biggest. And it is driven by fear. So I mean, we've definitely had. We started kind of the opposite. We just went after the challenging folks because, as any SSA can tell you, any SSA director, they're all going to tell you, like, that's our group of hardest folks to serve. Those, again, I'm air quoting, challenging behaviors, I get it. So we have to have options. That's why I love, like, when remote monitoring came out, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever, because then people can be left alone, but not really left alone. So, I don't know. It's been an evolution of sorts. Those folks have loved it.
Brian, thank you.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
you clearly brought the right person with you. So thank you.
I have a lot of internet.
Thank you both. And just one thing that we didn't mention with Allison Leedy with Hamilton County that I think is probably not mentioned because it's obvious, but I'm struck by the tech ambassador quality that both you and Allison have brought to the work, and something, Kyle, I know that you're deeply interested in as a strategy. And I love that you said, I hate technology, I love remote supports. So it's, I think, a helpful reminder that our tech ambassadors do not need to be the tech experts, but they're people who know how to listen and help people collaborate, problem solve, and brainstorm.
Maybe leave the tech stuff out to the smart people. Somebody has to have the idea, but.
Right.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
OD people. Susan, council members, you know from her previous time with us. And Susan, you've brought with you Sarah and Alyssa. Alyssa is pinch hitting for Julie, who was on your agenda. And again, just a little bit of reminder, context for your time with us. In our deliverables, we have a challenge to address how technology first and employment first can be woven together. And we have talked in previous sessions about blending and braiding, both DD and OOD supports in support of good lives for people. So these folks are going to tell us what they've been up to in that space.
Yeah. Well, thank you for prime time slot and everything. So I'll just kind of give a brief overview of what we do with technology here at OOD as it relates to employment. And so a couple numbers for you. This year in federal fiscal year 2008, just concluded the end of September, we served 2,025 individuals with what we call rehabilitation technology, and we authorized about $6 million in those services. And those services are very broadly defined, and so those things include things like communication devices and speech access. It includes different kinds of magnifiers, closed circuit televisions that zoom things up, those types of things. Computer access, like voice activated software and screen readers that help people access a computer. We also do home modifications, so that could be a ramp up to somebody's house that allows them to get in and out so that they can go to work. Hearing aids actually are even falling into this category, so about $1 million of that is hearing aids. And we also do adaptive driving or vehicle modifications that allow people to go back and forth to work. It's about 1.7 million of that. Those are, as you can imagine, quite expensive investments. So it is a wide variety of types of things that we are doing as a part of that rehabilitation technology. And so those are distinct services that we are authorizing from, but don't take into account maybe ways own career perspective, when I first got involved with this field, there was definite distinct technology that was very disabilities specific, right? It was developed specifically for people with disabilities, and it was tremendously expensive. I can remember spending $7,000 on voice-activated software that's right now on everybody's iPhone. And so I think that that's one of the trends that we're seeing is the use of more mainstream technologies in place of or to supplement some of the disability, like kind of long-term technologies that we've been using. You may have seen, like on Facebook or different places, the old Radio Shack ad that has like 20 different devices on it. You can all today get it on your iPhone. It's that type of a thing. And then I think the other trend that we're really wanting to see get more traction is more how do you integrate that into other types of services. So if we're doing on-the-job supports or we'll traditionally call job coaching, there could be a very parallel conversation. I think I might have mentioned this at the last meeting. Very parallel conversation about how we support people on community work sites as we do in their home, right? If you're out there, sometimes we have job coaches that are providing supports because they cannot be left alone in the community. And is that really the case, or is it like some of the, well, what if that we were just speaking about? And are there ways for us to use some of these similar technologies in an employment setting and kind of translate that? We haven't tackled that yet, but it's something that I think we see ourselves asking ourselves and wanting to explore. But we've got some other examples that Alyssa, Kira, and Sarah are going to share with you, and that's the really interesting part. So we'll let them get to that.
Hello, everyone. We are really excited to hear everything that's been shared today. I think it's really exciting. A lot of times we look at technology, like Susan was saying, in terms of that employment piece. So from the Employment First initiative is our Employment First partnership that we've had with DoD, and we actually just started our 6th year. And it requires a lot of collaboration from us with our local county boards and our service providers, individuals and employers. So there's a lot of collaboration that happens. And because our focus is around preparing for securing and maintaining employment for individuals, a lot of what we do with them can look at those avenues. So one of an example of the way we've used technology employment related is we have an option for some people to do video resumes. So we've worked with our providers in terms of a video resume, and that's really kind of helped with showing what individuals can do. And I think we've heard a lot about that today, and showing how they're able to work and what they're capable of doing, and kind of help eliminate that stigma. And whenever we're working with somebody who's trying to get that job and keep that job, we really want to look at what are the natural supports first. So what naturally is available and on their work site or in their home, what's naturally available. But sometimes those natural supports aren't enough. And so we start to look at some compensatory strategies, and that could be something as simple as a job coach that's identified some type of tool that's worked for that individual, and it might even work for many individuals on the work site. And when it gets a little more complicated, that's probably when we bring in rehab tech or rehab engineer, and our counselor is working with the individual and the county board to really assess that individual's needs and determine maybe something more specific to their needs. And that can fall in line with the technology we talked about, like an iPad or an iPhone, a watch. And those types of things can be used not only on a job to help somebody, but even those daily living skills that they might need in order to get to a job and help them keep that job. And so we even can look at the, what's Susan was saying, modifications if we We have an individual right now where they're needing assistance with like a remote to a door, and so we're looking at those types of technology pieces. And even recently had a couple scenarios where a counselor, the SSA and the individual did a remote counseling session with their OOD counselor in order to help decrease some of the anxieties that they were having about working in their jobs. So they were able to use the remote counseling in that way as well. And so those are some examples that we have from our kind of employment first partnership in working with individuals. And Sarah has also had some really cool examples.
Yeah, so one of the things, so my role here at OOD, it really focuses a lot on the blind and visually impaired, those sensory impairments, but when we try to think of solutions, we're not trying to think of just one specific kind of type of disability. We're really thinking about barriers. And so one of the barriers that we really tackled was this idea of wayfinding. And so wayfinding is really about where am I going, and how am I going to get there? And so we looked to find a technology solution to help us kind of create a way for people to be able to say, okay, I am going to this place, this is how I'm going to get there, and then what are those little things that I need to be reassured along the way to know that I'm on the right path? So we looked to a specific technology called Blind Square, and we liked this to next. So don't be put off by the fact it's called Blind Square. I do not have a visual impairment, but I actually use it every time I go somewhere because it gives me so much information. But it creates a solution that allows us to go from the outdoor environment where GPS works really, really well to the indoor environment where my GPS accuracy is now 212 feet. Well, if I can't get within 212 feet of something, I'm not there. So it's this integration of things that already exist, putting it into one accessible platform, whether that's a visual accessibility or cognitive accessibility or what have you. And it's this one platform of seamless transition from indoor to outdoor and back again. So the way I can kind of show you a little bit how it works is it's just a smartphone app. It goes back to mainstream technology. I want a solution that doesn't make me look like a person with a disability. I want to be like everybody else. And so it's just a smartphone app. You pop it up, and I can't use that one. I have a demo version because I go to a lot of places. So you pop up your app, and then it crashes because you're trying to do a demonstration. Doesn't normally happen. Okay. So what it does is you open it up, and sometimes it crashes because it's technology and whatever. So it tells you where you are, and then it doesn't do anything because it's not working today. I'm going to tell you that's probably my phone and not the app.
So just want you to know, Adam is feeling your pain. He's looking at you like, boy,
I grew up in Southeastern Ohio where it was like, So what it does is it allows you to create very specific messages. So GPS, Google puts a tag on everything, but Google puts a tag in the middle of your building, and that's not your front door. So whether I've been there before, whether I'm blind or visually impaired, or I have some other kind of disability, I don't need to get to the middle of your roof. I need to get to your front door. So with this, what we did is a demonstration project at Columbus State Community College, and I created messaging at the front door of every building. So now I have a solution that allows me to get to the front door of your building, and then I created messaging to tell you what's in that building. So Union Hall, for example. So I get to the front door of Union Hall, and now it tells me that first floor is veteran services, second floor is massage therapy. I don't remember what's on the other floor. 4 floors. So, but now I can make I have increased my ability to get to that front door. I don't have to ask someone for help. I'm reassured along the way because Blind Square keeps talking to me about where I am. It's constantly updating me. Well, not constantly. It's at your choice. You shake your phone. It's telling me, it's reassuring me of where I am and am I still on my path of where I'm trying to go. And now I've gotten there. So now I know, okay, I've got to go to the 3rd floor. So once I walk inside that door, these little guys take over. So it's called a beacon. It's a Bluetooth beacon. It does not work on Wi-Fi. It works on Bluetooth. This one is battery operated. and it starts giving me messages. So as I walk along, I've created a breadcrumb trail. So I've walked in the door, oh, now I don't have to find the elevator. And then once I get up the elevator, there's another beacon message. And now I know how to get to that person that helps me out. So it's really just about creating a solution. We targeted Columbus State because it was just, they had a problem, we had a thing we wanted to try and do a solution. But if you think about it from like, there's a gentleman actually on campus that has a TBI, traumatic brain injury, and he can never remember where he parks. So he drops a pin at his car every single day, and this gets him back to his car. And now he's kind of gotten that independence. So we did Columbus State. It could even be like, that I actually programmed this so it will talk to you, but you know, technology. But you could like, if you think about like, I know we have like Project Search, for example, at like, at a hospital. You could create a solution that allows someone, I don't need my boss or my natural support or my job coach to meet me at the front door to get me to my work site. I can create a trail for me to follow to get me to increase my independence. And they can work with, so if you think, like these are called aftershocks, they're actually bone conductor headphones.
They're awesome.
Love them. So that I keep my ears free. So I don't have to worry about some of those safety concerns. So that's just one piece of technology, one barrier that we kind of tackled. There's other things out there. We have a young lady who uses a service called IRA, which is like, it's sort of like remote supports. It's a service that she subscribes to, and then she uses Google Glass. And as she's walking along, she's kind of got somebody helping her identify, because she is blind, find some places. So, but that sort of kind of technology, you know, she can help her at a job task to be like, today I have to find this one little piece of thing, and I just need to be able to find it. So I think this concept of technology can really just expand out into even the most simplest of tasks. So that's kind of like, I know we're standing between you and lunch. And we wanted to be able to leave you guys.
Can't smell it yet, so you're okay.
Well, I also want to know that I am a fast talker. So we wanted to leave time for questions. I think you taught me, but wanted to be able to leave time for some questions about kind of what we've done with technology. I mean, we do tend to focus on the workplace because that's what we do. We have made strides to partner with, there are 23 community colleges in Ohio that are supported through the Ohio Association of Community Colleges. So this is expanding out to, well, pretty much everywhere at this point. And the nice thing about this technology is, like, so what we did this install at Columbus State Community College. It's not just about having access to Columbus State Community College. We put up what's called a geofence. I say we, Blind Square did it. We put up a geofence, this bubble, that starts at Columbus State and goes 3 miles out. So it's really about community access. So it's not just about, can I go to Columbus State? Now it's like, okay, I live within 3 miles of Columbus State. Actually, Rhodes Tower is in the bubble too. Now I can I just want to be able to go to the grocery store. And I can use that. And so Blind Square has a price tag on it as an app, unless you're in a geofence. If you're in a bubble, there's no price tag. That was one of the things we wanted to be able to do. And so as we expand this, our goal is to have Ohio be equated to access.
And I think that one of the good things about, you can see how our business partners that are hiring the people that we work with can often see implications or uses for this in their business and with their other employers that do not have a disability. I took a kid on a college visit, one of my kids on a college visit yesterday at the University of Dayton. I could not find the building. I could not find the elevator when we got into the building, and we had to be on the 8th floor. And I didn't want to walk up 8 floors, and we were late. And so, I actually thought, you know what? I wish they had this Blind Square, because I could totally use that. A lot of these employment settings, like an Ohio Health Hospital, that's a huge, that families have a difficult time finding rooms, getting to the cafeteria, those types of things. You know, I could see where some of this would really allow an individual with a cognitive disability of some kind, or any disability, navigate that environment so that they didn't have to ask one of their coworkers every day to take them to the cafeteria, so that they could, you know, walk and do whatever, go see their supervisor by themselves without having to figure out or worry about getting lost.
Or just trying to build those social connections. It's like, okay, I have these coworkers. My coworkers go to lunch every day. I want to be able to go to lunch with my friends or my coworkers. And so, like, you can use this to say, like, it'll tell you what's around you. So, like, I can be the one to say, like, hey, you guys want to go? Like, I just heard there's this new restaurant down the street. I want to go to Cosi and get a sandwich. You want to go with me? And then they can take the lead, and they can, like, try, like, it's. I get to be just like everybody else. I mean, you know, I have a son that has multiple disabilities, including, like, he only has half brain. And so, like, I think about, like, this, what's life going to be like for Jack when he grows up? So having those solutions in place to be able to say, I don't have to ask for help and figure it out, like, makes me feel better.
So how do you connect the counselor, who's the person, with somebody like you who knows all this stuff? But do the counselors have this kind of training? I mean, it's like the SSA you were talking about too, or do you have that negativity thing about, oh no, that won't work, or it's too expensive, or whatever?
I think just from a cultural standpoint at OOD, we're pretty solid with kind of the traditional rehabilitation technology. And so that part, I think we get. I think, you know,
so you would use that. I mean, that's
right.
Basic to what you do anyhow.
Correct. And we know who the providers are and so on. But if you want to get to the point where, you know, like Alyssa was saying, you know, we know some people that have used an iWatch to give them reminders of certain things. You know, it's time to change tasks.
Yeah.
Or you could use an iPad or an iPhone or something that could help you remember the steps, and you can just swipe through the steps. So that's the part, I think, where kind of we're at a similar place in terms of, you know, do you have providers that's delivering that particular service that would think, well, what if we use this technology?
Right.
And then how's it going to get paid for? And well, how's it going to get paid for after OOD closes the case? Because, you know, we're time-limited services. So there's a very comparable, I think, place in terms of how we can bring that to scale. And, you know, I think the thing that Sarah talks about is super important, especially because we're serving a lot of youth. And, you know, most of us just want to be like everybody else, right? And so, you know, especially a youth, they don't want some big honking communication board, maybe. But they would love to have an iPad, and, you know, that would just seem normal, and the kids in the classroom would think that's cool, how they're using their iPad, you know. And I think that that's just a super important consideration as we, you know, because part of our discussion is, you know, we're asking employers to hire qualified candidates that just happen to have a disability. I mean, that's,
they can do the job.
They can do the job. They may have different tools that other people don't have, or use them in a different way. Maybe it's the same tool, but they use it in a different way, but they can do the work. And we're not really about, you know, it is a nice thing to do to hire a person with a disability, but we really want to have, showcase the qualifications and the capabilities and the assets that they bring to the table and how they can impact the workforce. One of the biggest things that we hear from employers in terms of their needs is how can I use technology to accommodate people with disabilities? And we actually are in the process of filling a technology position within our business relations division, our employer and innovation services division, that will work more directly with employers to try to solve these these types
So
of
they would
issues.
come to you affirmatively and say, boy, it's not even about who you referred me.
Correct.
I know you guys do this and I have this person and can you help me?
Well, it's more at the macro level. You know, I want my
Oh, okay.
business, I want
Okay.
my business to be accommodating to individuals with disabilities. Are there things that I could do at my manufacturing company to allow somebody who can't stand all day? I'm just making this up.
So that's a new development, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a new
Susan?
position,
Yeah.
and there are other states that are doing that, but it's more, again, a business relations
Right.
strategy to kind of bust down some of those barriers.
And I think we looked at technology, like to a couple of points earlier today, it's about partnership, but it's about taking what used to be 7 different pieces of equipment and converting it down to, I can now use my iPod to my iPad, it can get me to work, it can help me do my job, it can help me make my dinner, it can
Right.
help me with whatever,
Right.
so.
And I just look like anybody else. Yeah. It's always cool.
And we did, I mentioned at the last meeting, I think we have an RFP that we
Yeah.
issued, and that came down, or ended, the request for proposal period ended last week. And I know we got 10, proposals, and we're looking at them. We've got a team of people that are looking at them, they're reviewing the proposals this week, and next week they'll be doing scoring. So by the next meeting, we'll be able to tell you more about those awardees. But we're really looking for kind of along the lines of what we've been talking about, how can we really move the needle within some of these services to increase the use of technology to just make a better difference.
But the partnership between RSC and DODD becomes increasingly important. And you know, the history is not so great here. We moved, to say the least, but we moved down the road quite a bit, but we're gonna have, it just makes sense to continue. It really does, in a big way.
Well, and an analogy, the same thing was discussed earlier, as more and more individuals with more complex disabilities
Right.
are residing in the community. Same with employment.
Yeah.
We're moving individuals with more and more complex
Right.
disability into community employment settings. And so how can we use this we have to evolve how we're doing
Yeah.
the work, because the same strategies are not going to work with people with more complex
Yeah.
disabilities as we keep moving down that
Yeah.
road. And so these are some of the things that we can be doing and looking at to try to really impact that, so that we can just move that needle.
So we would definitely want to address this in the report to the new administration. I mean, because that's just not a natural, I think, for them. So it's really important.
You know, it's interesting, I think on the tech council that Nysonger had put together prior to this, and Dan Davies, who'd been involved in that and came to the tech presentation, and he's working with Smart Columbus.
Yes.
And they're doing this app where, if you're somebody who is naturally anxious like me, and that you could look and see, okay, the bus is going to be 5 minutes late. It tells you all that kind of stuff. And so again, it's an app connected to transportation. And his point is, it's exactly the same app. So you don't need multiple apps. It's the same app that could prompt you in the workplace. It's the same app that could prompt you at home that, hey, it's 4 o'clock, you should be taking your medication. But, so I think the connection between various agencies where a single piece of equipment could do a lot of multiple sorts of things if we just, kind of think broader about that.
Yes, we could really hand the incoming administration a real map here for some important work that's already laid out.
That's our purpose, actually.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's.
The supports that go around that app are gonna change depending on if you're home.
Right.
Or if you're trying to go out to pizza, or if you're at work, and we need to think about
because, so let's just say I have remote supports at home, and then during the day I go to my work site. And I have someone that's checking on me periodically, I have natural supports, but sometimes I get stuck. And so maybe I'm just stuck, whatever that means for me right now. It'd be awesome if I was just able to contact my remote support provider, but they're now billing for employment supports, right? Or something like that. And then we just, because they already know that person, it just seems like it would be better than trying to figure out, okay, well, no, if it's A, you call this provider, and if it's B, you call this provider. That's not good, and plus the infrastructure has already been built. I mean, we don't have any ability